actually went to an MWA concert. Now that was everything you were just describing. There was shooting. We were running. It was at the Forum. It was scary as I don't know what. And I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I went to NWA concert, like exciting, and Ice-T was there and everything else. But I probably would never let my child today go. No. I would not even go to see NWA today. Even though they're much older, our age and stuff, I still would like not do some of the things that probably my mom let me do. Maybe just not knowing how dangerous it was out there. Maybe being a single female parent too. I don't know what the case may be, but some of the things that I did, they weren't, I wasn't like going out there into the violence, but like I went to my first Prince concert at the age of 15, and I was trying to dress like Vanity at the age of 15. So, it was just different. I mean,
welcome back to the 35th episode of Love, Growth, and Narratives. As usual, I'm Frederick.
And I'm Tiffany.
In this 35th episode, we're going to do the first of a two-part series on Generation X, which we both are. And we wanted to do this because I think we've been a bit forgotten. Folks talk about the two larger generations that we're sandwiched in between, the baby boomers that came out of World War II and the millennials that, grew up in the internet age. But I think we get largely forgotten in the struggles that we've had and our contributions. And I think that we're pretty awesome as well. What do you got to say about that, love?
I got to say, 2 years ago, a friend of mine asked me to say some MC rhymes, and I said the rhyme I'm about to say. The rhyme was step, and it went this way. You like that? I have to say, yes, we are a pretty unique generation, and we may be forgotten, but we can easily be remembered with some of the things that we're about to talk about right now. So I think it's important to acknowledge what we have contributed and the changes that we've seen in our lifetime so we can get a little more respect.
Yeah. So, we wanted to give a shout out to our other Gen Xers. And, we also want to give some appreciation, as we always do, to the folks who have been loyal listeners and subscribers to the podcast. We really appreciate it. We've been growing a lot, and we thank you all, and we hope that you continue to listen and hope you continue to get value from our content.
That's right.
So, so with that said, we're going to get started. All right, we're back. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because the way we grew up was a little bit different from, of course, the baby boomers and the millennials. We had phones, but of course they were hardline phones. We didn't have cell phones growing up, but we got to get out. We got to hang out. When we went out, in the street, our parents didn't know where we were. They couldn't track us, and so because of that, we were able to get into some things, and for some of us, it was different. Some of us, we had a time we had to be home. Some of us, it was the street lights. My father used to do this thing. He said, I want you to be home by the time it's dark. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? And I would get home and he would say, well, it's dark. And I was like, what are you saying? It's not technically dark, but, so we would get into arguments about stuff like that. Mm. But what I loved about that was we were pretty much free to do what we wanted, except when the neighbors were watching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was a latchkey kid. So, and an only child. So there was not anyone to hang out with to make sure I made it home, but I did make it home. And my mom, I just told her where I was going. I wasn't going a bunch of different places that I shouldn't be. She pretty much always knew, and that was comfortable. We lived in a lot of different cities, so I didn't do the same thing in every city, but I definitely had a good time and hung out with my friends and without, my mom, being able to track me per se. I mean, there was a point where I got a pager and all of that, and that was fun times.
Then you had to find a payphone.
Right. And I did find payphones and things like that. Or I was hanging out at a friend's house, so it was easy to use the landline. I don't think it was real, it probably was dangerous. Well, in fact, it was, because it was the 80s in LA, right? With all the gangs and all the drugs and everything. But it didn't feel like it because I didn't hang out in those areas per se. Yeah. But I have ducked behind a bus stop or two, dodging a bullet, hanging out with friends. So, it was good times. I feel like when I'm talking to Joseph and I'm trying to tell him about what it was like when I was growing up, I was out there, wasn't stuck behind a screen. Yes. We didn't have the screens to be stuck behind. Right. I mean, there was television, but we didn't watch it to the point that we didn't want to be social.
Well, we had like 3 main channels. You had ABC, NBC, and CBS.
Right.
As we got older, once we got into the 80s, then, cable TV started to come out. And I remember when cable TV came out, the remote control actually had a cable to it, and then, we one day went to wireless remote controls. I mean, that was an interesting evolution. And even back then, the resolution wasn't that great. Mm-hmm. But we only had like maybe 2 TVs in the house, 1 or 2 TVs in the house. And my parents would be watching one, if not both of them. And so, they would give us time to watch, Different Strokes or Dukes of Hazzard or something like that. But other than that, we were out in the street, and when I was younger, my preteen years, a lot of it was, I had to be supervised by my older sister. Mm-hmm. Gretchen was 2 years older than me. And I'm sure she really hated that. She would go out and like, take your brother. And she'd be like, she really hated it. Come on. So she'd take me with her begrudgingly. But it was the fun part about it was we were just out and free. And we didn't really appreciate it then because we didn't realize that at some point there were going to be cell phones and internet and all of that. Mm-hmm. What it was then was trying to navigate the different neighbors' house, because you knew what neighbors would be looking out the window, and would spot you and then would call your mother and something like that. So you knew the nosy neighbors. You always knew. Right. And you knew if they were home, you'd be like, okay, Miss Johnson's home. I see her car. Uh-huh. Like, oh boy. So let's get away from her. Don't go anywhere near her house because she's going to see you. She's going to call your mom, all that kind of stuff. But but it was also a time where we got into video games, Pong, mm-hmm. and the Atari. You still have your 2600.
I do. It's in the garage, right? Yeah.
Space Invaders. Yeah. And my father was a fiend for Donkey Kong. Yeah. I mean, he spent more quarters than you can imagine on Donkey Kong and Pac-Man.
Yeah, Pac-Man.
I
like Galaxy. I think it was called Galaxy. I don't know. You try to land your spaceship.
There was Galaga. And Frogger and all that kind of stuff. And do you remember, did you have arcades out here?
I'm sure.
Video game arcades?
Yeah. I mean, down to Santa Monica Pier.
Okay.
But initially for me, right, my starting was in New York, mm-hmm. and we lived on a cul-de-sac. Mm-hmm. And so all the kids my age, mm-hmm. their parents had all grown up there, mm-hmm. and their parents had all grown up there. So like you said, everyone knew everyone's grandchild, mm-hmm. everyone's everything. The school was literally 1 block away. You just had to go down the block, cross the street. You were at the K to 8 elementary school. Mm-hmm. We played Mother May I, kick the can, jump rope, climbing stuff that we probably shouldn't have been climbing, getting a hold of fireworks, things like that. That was a way that I spent a lot of my younger, I would say, 0 to 7. It was spent a lot outside, just hanging out right in front, riding your bike, your big wheel, all of that stuff. Lots of fun. And then when I moved to California, which mm-hmm. is Berkeley, we didn't know as many people. And then I got bused to a different school. It was harder to hang out with some of the people because I didn't live in the same neighborhood, but there were a few friends that I made there. And then later on, yes, the video games came, like when I came back to LA, because I went back to New York for a bit and back to LA, that's when we did spend a lot of time at the Santa Monica Pier and the arcade and stuff like that. And like I said, I had our Atari at home. So we didn't have a car at first. So a lot of it was still spending it at home with friends who lived in the building until we got on the bus, the RTD, and started traveling up and down Wilshire to different places, like always going to Santa Monica and Venice. We spent a lot of time there. So I was out quite a bit, you know.
So that's interesting that was the only, so there probably were other arcades. That was probably just the only one you went to.
Probably, yeah.
Because, you know, where I lived, there were arcades all over the place.
Well, we had a grocery store called Mayfair, not far from where we lived in Hancock Park, borderline Koreatown. And in Mayfair, there were 2 video games in there. So my friend and I, we would go over there and hang out there for hours, just playing video games in there.
And most of your convenience stores would have like a console there. And what we learned was if you had a straw, you would go to the local McDonald's or wherever and get a straw, and you would chew the end so that it would fit up into the little door where you put the quarters.
Oh, wow.
And you would hit the latch, and then you could just keep playing for free. Oh, man.
I don't remember us doing
You don't remember that? Oh, yeah.
We were good kids.
Well, most of the guys remember that. You chew that straw, you send it up in there, you just keep jiggling it. Yeah, and you could play for days for free. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I miss those days, and you know, but yeah, pinball machines and stuff like that.
I did like that. I like the sound. I can hear it now when you said it.
Foosball, everything, you know. But we were really active, you know, playing kickball. You know, we used to play football in the street because we were idiots, you know.
Or skateboarding, bike riding.
Bike riding. I was the only kid in my neighborhood who could ride a unicycle. Yeah, you know, that was an interesting thing. You know, it took about 3 years to get good at it.
Wow.
But I don't know what made me want to do it, but I was just one of those things that no one else could do it, so I wanted to learn how to ride a unicycle. So, yeah, I mean, that was a lot of fun, but it was just being out there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't think we appreciated it. But I was thinking about some of the things that we went through, you know, that other generations did not, especially that the millennials can't understand, because, you know, if you look at a lot of the stupid things that we did, none of that you can search and find video or photographic evidence online.
Yeah, did or said, right? Because now, like, you're going back, somebody's like 40 and it's like, when they were 13, they were racist, you know what I mean? And like trying to ruin them, you know, however many years later. But yes,
you can't find, like, you know, when someone is reviewing my clearance or anything like that, they can't find a statement made when I was 16 in high school or anything. You know, that's got to be crazy. That's got to be a little unnerving, because, you know, when you're that age, you're gonna say and do dumb things,
right? And
to think that that's gonna affect you for the rest of your life, you know. We had no way for someone to get in touch with us, you know, and we yell at Joseph now when he doesn't answer his phone,
right?
You know, when he's out, you know, and doesn't answer his phone. But there was no way to get in touch with us.
None.
If our parents wanted to get in touch with us, they would call around to other people who lived in the area. Hey, did you see him? Did you see him? You know, and they would send their child out, or they would get in their car and drive around to the different areas, you know, like with my parents, especially if it was like during the day. They would drive around to the basketball courts, because that's what I did. I played a lot of basketball. So they would drive around to the different basketball courts, see if they could see me. And, you know, we did all of that crazy stuff. You know, you get hurt and you would just limp home, and, you know, and that was it, you know. And we didn't, you know, we didn't whine and cry so much about being hurt. Or at least I didn't, because if I did, then my mother wouldn't let me go out the next day. She's like, no, you're hurt. No, you got to stay home and rest. You got to rest that leg.
Right.
And so I knew that if I got hurt, you know, by the time I got home, I had to play it off.
Right.
I had to act like I was okay, or my mother would not let me go back out.
I don't think we whine and cried about a lot of things. Like, we're tougher, not in a bad way. I mean, there are things that happen or were said that, I could still feel the hurt or the trigger behind it, but not like today where you just like fall apart over everything.
No.
So yeah.
No. If you fell apart because someone teased you, that would just multiply.
Right.
They're like, what? What? They fall apart when they get teased? Right. They would really go at it
and
then.
That's another thing. We called it teasing back then. Now it's bullying.
Right.
And there is bullying. There always has been. But now we're really using those words as synonyms and they're not. So everyone's just super hypersensitive.
Yes.
Where we weren't as much. And I don't know about you. Like, I couldn't wait to drive. I feel like a lot of the kids now, they're not rushing to drive. There's some people in their 20s that don't drive. But I was like, I am in that car. I mean, first of all, we had driver's ed in high school. So our teacher, we got to drive all around what I now know as Baldwin Hills. At the time, I didn't know.
Yeah.
When I think about it, where my school was, I probably shouldn't have been over there, but he was very liberal. So we drove all around, drove to his house, everything else. And then I would take the car, I'm like, Mom, can I just move it to the back and zoom, drive down the street to my friend Lisa's house? Mom mad as hell, but I did it, I mean, I didn't feel that fear where I feel like a lot of kids today, they're fearful of doing a lot of things. They're just not as independent.
Right.
Right. And so, I mean,
well, we had to be independent because I know, like for me, I mean, my father tried to cut me off when I was 12 and, because my father grew up tough and he said, you need to learn to do for yourself, at 12. So, I had a paper route, at 12. And by the time I was 13, I worked at a tennis club and it was just, you've got to work, you've got to make your own way, and I probably worked at every kind of fast food restaurant from, McDonald's and people in Maryland will know about Jerry's Sub Shop and stuff like that, or Wendy's, everything. And it was just, you had to have a job. My older sister, she always had a job growing up. You just knew that at a certain age, for most kids that I knew, it was probably around 15. By around 15 or 16,
that's when I started.
You were working. It was just that's what it was.
Right. Yeah. For me, it was more fun. I don't remember it being that I had to. I was 15. I got a worker's permit, right? And so I worked in a sandwich shop, but that lasted for 2 weeks because everybody was going to the beach and I wasn't. It was like, okay, I'm quitting so I can go to the beach. But I also worked in a daycare down the street, and that is how I got my love of teaching. But so I feel like I could be making this up, but I think it was more just I want to work. Like, ooh, it's cool. I get to work and have my own money. It wasn't like I had to. My mom didn't push that. I don't know if that's the difference with a boy and a girl, or I have no idea.
Well, I mean, because I think with Gretchen, my older sister, she wasn't really, I don't think she was forced to work. Gretchen wanted, she's always been an independent person. So she would have worked either way, and so, I mean, but for me, it was really, I had to work, and so my father really pushed me to do for myself and to buy my own clothes and pay my own way. And so it was different where it was like, no, you've got to figure these things out. And I don't think, millennials really went through any of that.
Right.
You know, and then you think of, we went through the crack era.
Yes.
Now it hit you guys in LA first before it hit us.
Yes. Yeah. It was pretty bad.
Where I was living at the time was right between DC and Baltimore. It hit us a little bit later, but when the crack era went through and people were dying left and right, that was crazy.
Yeah.
So when people talk about the murder rate now, I was like, man, you don't even know.
Yeah.
Late 80s, early 90s, crack era.
Yep. And throw in the gangs there. I don't know if the gangs were big, back on the East Coast like they were here, but
it wasn't gangs, it was neighborhoods.
Okay. Yeah. It was just really scary. Like you needed to watch what you had on. Even if you were not affiliated with gangs, you had to watch what you had on and where you were at and who you were dating. Like it was just, I know I was scared because I didn't live on that side of town where all the gangs were, but they did. Of course, gangs are everywhere, but they weren't hugely like in the area that I lived in.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until high school that I really was like, ooh, gangs, what?
Yeah.
And that was like a scary time to.
Back then I would try to, because I was a knucklehead and, wanted to be things I wasn't. And so I would try to sneak and go to the Go-Go's in DC. People in DC know about Go-Go, the Black Hole was the spot. And there you would go and, there was always a fight. There was always craziness. And that way, that next Monday at school, I could go and tell everybody about what I saw about the fight, or somebody was shooting and everything. Yeah. And, when you're 16, you don't think any of those bullets are for you. So it's like people are shooting. You're just like, oh, this is cool. And not realizing that, you could actually die as well. So you're just young and stupid. Yeah. But, but yeah, in the DC area, you had neighborhoods, and so there and I didn't really know many of them and stuff, but it was just wanting to be out there and wanting to be something that you weren't, and luckily I got out of it fairly unscathed. I got jumped a few times and beat up and robbed a few times, but for the most part, I came out okay.
Wow. Well, we're a little different in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, of course I did some things I shouldn't have been doing at the age, but I was more conservative. So I wasn't really a bad kid and didn't desire to be all mixed up in all that. I was like, no, plus home life already had its own situation. So I wasn't trying to make my social life the same way, but I knew of people that did affiliate and do all of that stuff. And I just watched from afar because it's like, I like living. And I understand a whole lot now about that lifestyle and people who indulge in that lifestyle than I did back then. I was pretty judgmental about it. And so I just stayed clear of it. But and then when NWA hit the scene.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It just completely, because being originally from New York, I was even though I grew up mostly here, I'm very I feel very close to New York in some ways, especially when it comes to hip hop. So all my favorite artists were mostly New York artists. And then when NWA came on the scene and completely changed rap, I liked it. I actually went to an MWA concert. Now that was everything you were just describing. Yeah. There was shooting. We were running. It was at the Forum. It was scary as I don't know what. And I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I went to NWA concert, like exciting, and Ice-T was there and everything else. But I probably would never let my child today go. No. I would not even go to see NWA today. Even though they're much older, our age and stuff, I still would not do some of the things that probably my mom let me do. Maybe just not knowing how dangerous it was out there. Maybe being a single female parent too. I don't know what the case may be, but some of the things that I did, they weren't. I wasn't going out there into the violence, but I went to my first Prince concert at the age of 15. And I was trying to dress like Vanity at the age of 15. So, it was just different. I mean, I'm sure kids try to emulate celebrities now too, but I don't know.
Yeah, and we were doing that with a lot of the, when people talk about gangster rap, they really start thinking about the West Coast. But for a lot of us in Gen X, at least for me, I think about Schoolie D out of Philly, and Schoolie D, was the first one who really started a lot of that gangster rap. In fact, Ice-T, talks about how he got a lot of his style from Schoolie D. And even with Ice-T, 6 in the morning, and I remember when Eazy-E, when his songs first came over to the East Coast, because you got to understand, because there was no internet, there was a slow process.
Yes. Right.
It would take maybe a year for a song to get from one coast to the other.
Right.
And so, by the time we got Eazy-E, I didn't quite know what to make. It was interesting. I liked it, but I didn't quite know what to make of it. Right. But it was like, wow, this is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got into NWA and all that kind of stuff. But it was different because we were also coming off of the Stop the Violence movement.
Right.
With KRS-One.
Yes.
Conscious
rap.
poor righteous teachers. You know, I mean, there was so much of that X-Clan. You know, so it was different.
Right.
It was, I mean, so they were going way in the different direction.
Yeah, and it's been in that direction for a minute. Yeah. It's hard to bring back the conscious rap now because everyone's like, what sells? What sells is what I want to hear. But still just good times back then, you know, all the clothes, the Jordache and Gloria Vanderbilt's, and you can't get between me and my Calvin Klein and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What was it in the 80s? What was what was the singer from, I mean, she was a dancer from the Laker Girls, Paula Abdul and LA Gear. Like, you got to have your LA Gear on, you know, you had to have your hair cut with one side long and one side short. At least I was out here, you got to rock your salt and pepper, right? And all the dangling earrings and your name on everything and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, and I'm going to tell you, we used to separate the fellas from who do you like more, salt or pepper?
Oh yeah,
you know, I mean, that was a big deal because I like both of them, but I like pepper more than salt. Yeah. You know, that was a big deal. Who do you like more? You know, salt or pepper? Yeah,
right.
But yeah, they were big. You know, I was big into hip hop back then. You know, my two real favorites that I listened to the most back then was probably KRS-One and Cool G Rap. And you're talking about two totally different types of artists, you know, and I loved Big Daddy Kane and Rakim and, you know, and of course, LL, Public Enemy. You know, there's so many of them, you know, but I also start to think of during that time, the AIDS epidemic hit.
Right.
And we really didn't know what to do with that. You know, there was no internet. You couldn't look up stuff online, or we were scared and didn't know what to do. And then, do you remember when Magic came out?
Yeah.
And that, you know, because it was like Magic,
right.
You know, I mean, that really hit hard.
Yeah.
When Magic came out,
right. I didn't have a whole lot of. I mean, of course, the AIDS thing was scary. And then Eazy-E had AIDS. I remember finding out about it. I used to work for the both YW and YMCA. But I remember working with a colleague, and she was saying that someone she knew saw Eazy-E on one of those vans that kind of pick up elderly people and take them places, and that he had AIDS. This is before anything came out. I was like, girl, whatever. That's drama. You know, people are making up stuff. And it was like week and a half later, I think he was dead, you know? So I was like, wow. But I didn't have all that fear around gay people because one of my mom's roommates was gay, and we were around gay people all the time, men and women, tons, and which a lot of them passed away from AIDS and like drug related issues. But you know, I grew up around that. So for me, it's not a big deal like how it is today. I see some people really flipping out about stuff. Nor should it be a big deal. These are just people living their lives. But you know, I just didn't think of it as anything taboo, you know? But what I was also going to say is going back to, or not going back to, but just also shifting it a little bit in terms of how much things cost, right? Like I remember growing up, like I could go to a concert, a Prince concert or the club, and they had clubs in Hollywood where a lot of the big performers would play. We could see LL singing, and it was like, not $1 million. Like it was like, you know what I mean? It was reasonably 85, something like that. There was no $1,000 ticket to go see Beyonce.
Well, $85 was a lot back then.
It was, but now, come on now. We're talking thousands, even up to 8,000. I mean, it's a big jump in our lifetime, you know? And so I'm thinking a lot of kids may not, unless you have wealthy parents, or parents who, like my mom, she would avoid paying something she should be paying to make sure I had an experience. Oh, man. But now that's way more costly, right, than what it used to be. Something a lot of kids don't experience some of the things we did because just things have just gone up, you know, incredibly.
But there's also, I think there's more pressure on parents nowadays to get their kids these expensive experiences. Right. Whereas, you know, when we were kids, it was like, hey, my parents were like, hey, we can't afford it.
Right.
It's just, you know,
exactly.
It's not even a thought.
Right.
You know, a lot of the sports I got into as a kid, it had to do with what we could afford. You know, I played basketball because all you needed was a basketball and shoes.
Right.
You know, it wasn't an expensive sport. I remember when we had lived in Pittsburgh for a while, I tried to start playing hockey. Oh, forget about it. You know, between the skates and the stick, forget about it. It was just no way.
Yeah.
There was just no way. And so you kind of did what you could afford to do.
Right.
But in terms of money, how much was a payphone when you were
I think it was 10.
It was a dime.
10, and then it was a dime. Point where it was like 20, but
I think it went from a dime straight to a quarter, if I remember.
Maybe, I don't remember.
And then it went to 35 cents. Yeah. And we also found a way around that. So there were these they used to have these yeah, I know. We had learned about these little test numbers. It was like 10444 or something like that you could dial. And you could get through. I mean, you couldn't make a long distance call, but you could make a local call. But that was when you didn't have to dial the area code. You could just dial the 7 digits, you know, because back then, if you had to go beyond the 7 digits, you were long distance and you had to pay.
Right. Makes sense with some of the songs that we back in the day that there was no area code.
And those long distance charges were ridiculous. You know, and you look at now, you can call all over the place, you know, for no additional charge.
Right.
Back then, I remember people having $800-900 phone bills.
Yeah.
You know, just from calling cousins and stuff. You know, I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and you remember back when you would call, and if you called someone's phone and somebody there was on the phone, you get that
right.
You know, you get that busy tone.
Yeah.
You know, and then they came out with call waiting. And you were a really popular kid if you had 3-way calling. We never got 3-way. I was like,
we did have 3-way.
We weren't that popular. Yeah. We had call waiting, but we didn't have 3-way. I was like, come on, why can't we get 3-way? Yeah.
It was good times though, and I look back on it. Even then, I mean, it was having fun. You know what I mean? When new things came out, and maybe that's how kids feel. I don't know that kids feel that way today. I don't know if they appreciate the technological advances the way we did, because right, ours were big, right?
Yes.
Where theirs are just gradual, like the phone, you know, goes from, I don't know, whatever it did, like
just the phone got smaller in size.
Yeah.
And the cameras got better in resolution, but they already had them.
Right.
You know, they had camera phones, but they just got better.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but they didn't have all that. You're right. They didn't have the huge leaps in technology like we did, going from our pagers.
Yeah.
And if you remember, like when you would go to like a gas station, you would have a line of payphones.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly. Yes.
Or you go to some like low income like apartment complexes.
Yeah.
They would have like a line of payphones, and you know, you'd have people who were hanging out at the payphone, you know, stuff like that.
Yep,
They come and bring them a whole bunch of quarters and stuff like that.
Right.
And, oh man, yeah, those were some interesting times.
Agreed. And I think even like being a student during those times are different. Like, I don't know, there was like teachers were so cool. So many more teachers are cool. Now I think teachers have to work harder than they ever did. I know my teachers didn't do all the stuff I do as a teacher.
Right.
You know, and students weren't at least not where I went to school, wasn't as much misbehaving. It was like 1 or 2 and everybody was like, ooh, you know, now it's like, okay, half the class is doing something they shouldn't be doing, and it's almost normal to them, you know. But for us, I didn't grow up like that. People were like, this is school, this is my teacher, behave.
But I think there was a difference in expectations. You know, I mean, our parents said, no, you're there to learn. You ain't there to play around. You ain't there to make friends.
Right.
You're there to learn. And so,
but we listened to that, because I know that my students' parents say the same thing, but it's right out the ear when they get to school.
Enforced it.
Yeah,
They actually enforced that expectation. And so we knew better, you know, even though I was a knucklehead and got into my little bit of trouble, I knew I was getting into trouble. And so I had to pick and choose when I was going to do something stupid.
Right.
You know? So,
kids today are like, I'm in trouble. They don't even know what trouble is because it's like
care.
Nothing really happens.
Right.
So.
Right. We're gonna take away your cell phone for a day or whatever. It's like, I don't get it.
It's like, cool, I have my iPad.
But I remember in high school, we used to have to do projects. You have to go to the library. There's no internet.
That's right. Yep. Going through all those little cards and everything. Yes.
Oh man.
And then type it up.
And then the book you needed, someone's already checked it out. You're like, oh, come on.
Right.
So now it's like, so now I either need to figure out a different book for my project, or I need to go to another library.
Right. But didn't we all have library cards? We had library cards,
absolutely had library
now
cards.
Today you got to beg the kids, like give them rewards and all kinds of things to go get a library card.
Yeah.
And even if they get it, they may not use it beyond that.
But the library was a hangout.
Yeah.
You know, during the during the school day, I mean, school after school, you would go and hang out at the library. Tell your parents you got a project to work on, even though you don't.
Right.
And everybody would be hanging out at the library. Not even really doing any work, but just hanging out.
Yeah.
You know, so those were some interesting times.
They were. And I appreciate them. I do. I really do. And sometimes I wish, I try to, as, now a parent, like bring in some of those ideas or at least share what was going on then.
But they can't conceptualize.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the problem. I mean, they grew up with so much technology that it's really unfair to expect them to conceptualize. It's just like, when I was growing up and my father would always get on me about what he had to deal with growing up in Atlanta in the 50s and 60s with segregation and all the stuff that he had to deal with.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I know that's bad, but I can't conceptualize what you're talking about because I never went through it. I know it was bad, but it's just, it doesn't land the same way with me as it does with someone else of your generation.
Okay. Yeah, for me, my mom, she grew up in the north, right? Northeast. So she still experienced it in different ways, like teachers telling her when she wanted to take a particular class or she was interested in being an architect. And they're like, Black people aren't architects. You need to go, to nursing or you need to be a secretary. I mean, she was told things like that and stopped from doing certain things. And I understand that still. I think that still happens in certain parts of the country. And I guess because I read about it so much and there's other ways that people are told they can't do things. Sometimes it's not as blatant, but maybe those services just aren't in that area or in that school or whatever, or so people can get in. But I don't have as hard of a time understanding maybe how she grew up as I would think I would. And it's not that I expect a kid nowadays to completely resonate with what we did, but I want them to understand how much more time we had out with our friends. That's something anyone could be able to do because not everyone lets their kids have cell phones and all of this screen time, and they put their kids in different activities and they're forced to, go hang out and have lots of play dates, quite expensive play dates, but they do it,
And honestly, I would say there's trade-offs to all of that. The trade-off to that is that child may not be as comfortable with technology as the other kids. And so you do want to kind of balance that where the child does have enough experience with the technology where they can really, play with it, beat it up, get used to it, but not so much that socially they're just a wreck. So I don't know the balance. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I haven't figured that out,
But we know that all the screen time is really impacting the kids, so it's making it not better, so we do know that. Not. Right. So I think we need to take heed of that. But yes, we do appreciate the technology, like, with us both getting, your car was much newer than mine, but with me getting a new car, at first I didn't like it. I'm like, no, what do you mean? I'm turning around. I'm not looking at any camera. but it takes some getting used to, because that's a big thing too in our lifetime. What cars can do now versus what they did, 20, 30 years ago is like unbelievable to me, actually. So we've just seen quite a bit of change.
Yes.
And I think, but I think our experiences made us stronger and more resilient. We did grow up in an era of get a job. I mean, which is similar to our parents. I feel like get a job, stay at it till the end. I think especially teachers, though.
Yeah.
But some people are moving around a little bit more. But I think the young people, they really move around.
Yes, they do.
And college is not pushed as much as it was. I feel like growing up for me. I mean, not that anyone in my family was actually pushing college. They weren't. But I think, people are starting their own business. They got social media accounts that make them millions of dollars. They're more free and creative to take risks.
It's definitely different. I love that I'm a Gen Xer. I love the generation that I grew up in and what I was exposed to. I would imagine if I were a millennial, I would love that too.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to make sure that we get a chance to talk about what we go through, because like I said, the discussion a lot of times gets, the boomers get to talk about what they went through coming up after World War II and the civil rights movement and the hippies and all that other kind of stuff. And the millennials get to talk about, but because we were a smaller generation, population wise, and we started off probably as a less disciplined generation and less, not as well defined generation. But I think we're a pretty cool generation. But we're going to talk about some other challenges having to do with Gen X, and in part 2, some not fun stuff.
Yeah,
but other challenges. But do you have anything else before we close?
No, I just want to say, and this could be the case, I don't really remember so much when I was younger, but I feel like everybody wants to go back to the 80s and 90s constantly. The clothing, the talk, the
music.
Yeah, the music. It's like you'll find very young people still knowing the music of the 80s and 90s very well. Yeah. We definitely were a huge part of the culture.
Yes. Yes, and hip hop owes so much to us.
That's right, absolutely. Yes. It's a lifestyle.
Even though a lot of the pioneers were baby boomers, but the greatest were Gen Xers.
Yeah.
So, for this 35th episode of Love, Growth, and Narratives, I'm Frederick.
And I'm Tiffany.
Thanks a lot, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.